Salt Lake City, June 14, 1998. The sun had barely grazed the horizon when Samantha Fisher pushed open the glass door of the Red Canyon Diner, a corner restaurant that seemed to defy time with its worn facade and a blue neon sign that flickered occasionally. It was 5:30 a.m. on a Sunday that would not be ordinary. The streets were silent, broken only by the distant hum of buses and the first workers walking to their shifts. But beneath that calm, the entire city held its breath. It was the night of Game 6 of the NBA Finals, Bulls versus Jazz. Chicago led the series 3-2, and everyone knew, for Utah, there was no tomorrow. At 26, Samantha had worked at the Red Canyon for almost 6 years. Her uniform, a white blouse already yellowed at the edges, and a black skirt that had lost its original cut, was a silent reminder of how long her life had revolved around that Formica counter and coffee-stained vinyl tables. Her salary barely covered the rent of her small apartment in Glendale, a simple Salt Lake neighborhood, and there were still expenses for her mother, who had raised her 2 younger siblings alone since her father's death. "Good morning, Sam." Paolo, the 60-year-old Italian cook already in a greasy apron, greeted her as he cracked eggs directly onto the griddle. The smell of bacon began to fill the air. "How's little Lucy today?" Lucy was only 3 years old and carried the heavy breath of asthma in her chest. She was the center of Samantha's universe, the reason for working 2 jobs, mornings at the restaurant and nights cleaning a commercial building near home. The restaurant's basic health plan didn't cover expensive medications, and each box seemed to last less than her daughter's cough. "Better. She slept a little more peacefully yesterday," Samantha replied, tying her apron. "Mrs. Anderson said she even played this morning." Mrs. Anderson, the elderly neighbor who had looked after Samantha as a child, now watched Lucy during the day. She was generous, charged little, but Samantha dreamed of the day she could put her daughter in a decent daycare, with other children, with colorful toys and activities that would help strengthen the girl's fragile body. The Red Canyon was in a transitional area of the city, neither exactly downtown nor suburb. Its clientele was as varied as it was unpredictable. Construction workers before their shift, executives seeking strong coffee, college students looking for cheap meals, and now, that weekend, tourists from all corners in purple and gold Jazz jerseys, ready to experience the decisive night. Samantha knew it could be a day of good tips, but she also knew that this kind of luck rarely knocked on her door. At 7 a.m., as always, manager Dan Hale entered the restaurant, pushing the door as if he owned the world. At 50, with a permanently sour expression and a voice that seemed to spit irritation, he needed no reason to mistreat employees. But Samantha had already noticed. The harsher, more impatient tone always fell on her and Maria, the other black waitress on the shift. It was pure, raw prejudice. Samantha swallowed it silently, because swallowing was the only way to keep that meager job. That morning, as she wiped table 4 and watched the neon sign flicker again, Samantha couldn't imagine. Everything that seemed small and invisible in her life would soon intersect with a gigantic night, the night the whole world would look at Salt Lake City. "Samantha Fisher, you useless thing." Dan Hale's voice cut through the air as soon as he walked through the door, rough as sandpaper, laden with disdain. He didn't even bother to say good morning. "Table 7 wasn't cleaned properly yesterday. When you clean a table, it needs to be clean. Understand?" Samantha, already with the dishcloth in her hands, looked up at the accused spot. The table gleamed impeccably. The vinyl shone under the fluorescent light, and there wasn't even a fingerprint on the Formica top. But she knew. Challenging Dan in front of others was like throwing gasoline on a fire. It wasn't worth it. The real problem wasn't table 7. It was table 12. That one, yes, always had forgotten crumbs, dirty glasses piled up, crumpled napkins thrown on the floor. But that table wasn't Samantha's. It belonged to April Duncan's section, the 18-year-old new waitress. Blonde, pretty, always with an easy laugh and a phone in her hand, April worked unhurriedly and let others chase after what she didn't do. And Dan? Dan not only turned a blind eye, but seemed enchanted by her. His eyes glowed almost ridiculously whenever April passed, which made her untouchable. Samantha, on the other hand, was the preferred target. Black, tired, in a worn uniform, she carried more on her shoulders than anyone else there, and yet she was treated as if she was worthless. "Of course, Mr. Hale, I'm sorry. I'll clean it right away." Her voice came out calm, trained, like someone who had learned to swallow pride to ensure her daughter's bread. Dan raised an eyebrow, savoring every second of the spectacle of his petty tyranny. "Hurry up. You should have done it yesterday, and today is game day. The place might be packed, and I want everything perfect. Perfect! Do you understand me? Or do you want me to draw it?" A heavy silence fell over the dining room. Even Paolo behind the counter stopped beating eggs against the griddle. Everyone looked sideways, not daring to intervene. "Yes, sir. I understand perfectly, Mr. Hale." Samantha squeezed the cloth tightly, swallowing her anger like one swallows shards of glass. And as she bent down to clean an already clean table again, the Red Canyon sign flickered red in the window, reminding her that Salt Lake City was not just breathing injustice that morning, it was also breathing the tension of an entire city about to make history. The day had started like any other, although Hale's scolding still burned in Samantha's chest. But the Red Canyon diner didn't stop, and the morning rush soon occupied her mind. Mrs. Andrews asking for the same scrambled eggs with bacon, strong black coffee, and the cutlery aligned just the way she liked it. Mrs. Lolly, always in a hurry, always sweet, who left bigger tips than Samantha thought fair. The noisy group of city workers who came in with cement dust on their boots, spread jokes around the room and, despite the mess, always paid in cash and slipped a few extra dollars into her hand as if they knew the weight of her life. And then, on that Sunday in June, something different happened. Two tall men in dark suits entered before the rush. Their presences too out of place for that neighborhood. Their impeccable haircuts, upright posture, attentive eyes. They weren't ordinary customers. They were bodyguards. They asked for an isolated table in the corner, away from the window and the movement. Samantha made sure to bring cold water immediately, but they just smiled slightly and said, "We're waiting for someone else. We'll order together." It was 11:30 a.m. when the movement died down, the calm before lunch. Samantha took the opportunity to restock ketchup, fill salt shakers, align napkins with the care she knew Hale would scrutinize, as if it were a sentence. It was then that time seemed to hold its breath. The sound of the street outside grew distant. The doorbell rang, and the Red Canyon plunged into an instinctive, heavy silence. All eyes turned to him. Michael Jordan. There he stood, at the entrance, as if destiny itself had pushed the door open with him. The man who carried on his shoulders not only the bulls but the hope of millions. He wore dark jeans, a simple shirt, sunglasses hanging from his pocket. Nothing flashy, and yet his presence made the air vibrate. Salt Lake City breathed basketball that day. The streets already boasted more purple and gold Jazz jerseys than any other fabric. Taxi radios and bars talked of nothing but Stockton, Malone, and Jordan's last game. And now there, in a small neighborhood restaurant, the greatest player of all time appeared as if he were just another hungry man before any engagement. Samantha, who was refilling sugar at table 8, felt her knees give way for an instant. Her heart pounded loudly, so loudly that she feared the customers would hear. She had grown up watching her late father cheer at every successful shot, yell at the television during the finals against the Pistons, and almost cry with joy when the Bulls lifted another trophy. For her, Jordan was more than a player. He was a living myth, someone who seemed untouchable, distant from another dimension, but now he was there, in flesh and blood, at the Red Canyon diner, on the day the whole world expected him to step onto the court for the last time in the NBA Finals. She took a deep breath, regained her composure, and advanced with the professional smile that was already part of her. A customer was a customer. It didn't matter if it was a tired worker or Michael Jordan. "Good morning," she said, her voice firm despite the emotion. "Table for how many?" Jordan leaned slightly, that calm and confident gaze that seemed to penetrate anyone. "Good morning. I'm with those guys over there in the corner." He pointed to the men in suits and walked towards them, unhurriedly, but with the naturalness of someone who already knew he was the center of the world, even if he was just looking for a peaceful meal. Samantha walked beside him, the almost empty restaurant amplifying the soft sound of her steps against the waxed floor. She led him to table 23 where the two men were, in the most secluded corner. A shiver ran down her skin when she noticed the coincidence, or perhaps destiny. It was exactly the number Jordan had immortalized on the courts. How many times had her father shouted at the television, "23, Michael Jordan, that man is unstoppable." The echo of those words seemed to vibrate within her as she pulled out the chair. "Is this good, boss?" one of the bodyguards asked, already standing firm as a wall. "Perfect. Thank you, guys." The two men moved to another nearby table from where they could watch without invading the star's privacy. It was clear. Anyone who dared to approach would have to go through them, and it wouldn't be an easy crossing. Michael was there for something simple, almost sacred, a peaceful coffee. As Jordan settled in, Samantha couldn't help but notice the discreet tension in his shoulders. It wasn't fear, it wasn't insecurity. There was a calm seriousness, like that of a warrior before a final battle. Perhaps it was just trained eyes that saw what others didn't, but she noticed he carried a weight that no one else could relieve. "Can I bring you a menu, Mr. Jordan? Or would you prefer to start with something to drink?" she asked, keeping her voice steady, even with her heart racing. "Coffee, please, very strong, and you can bring the menu, yes." A few minutes later, Samantha placed a large, steaming cup before him, its strong aroma dominating the air. Without knowing why, she was sure that's how Michael Jordan liked it. Direct, intense, no fuss. Returning with the menu, her eyes were drawn to something he held discreetly, a photo of an older, smiling couple, frozen in a time that no longer existed. Before she could stop herself, the words escaped. "They're your parents, right?" Michael looked up, surprised. For a second, the player's intense eyes scrutinized her with suspicion. But then, they softened. A slight smile, laden with discreet pain, formed on his lips. "How did you know?" Samantha swallowed hard, regretting being so direct, but continued sweetly. "By the way, you're looking at the photo. It's the same look I see in the mirror when I think of my father." She took a deep breath. "And I confess, my father, when he was alive, he was passionate about you. I grew up watching games with him. He showed me your photos from the beginning of your career, cut from newspapers. I guess he didn't root for the Bulls. He rooted for you." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, deep, as if suddenly the restaurant walls didn't separate two such different lives, but united them at the most human point: absence. Jordan discreetly turned the photo face down, as if it were too intimate to be exposed any longer. He looked at her, and his eyes seemed to see beyond the cheap uniform and the tiredness etched on Samantha's face. "So you lost your father too?" The pain came like an arrow, but Samantha forced herself to smile, even if it was a smile wet with longing. "Yes, 2 years ago. He was my hero. We didn't have much, but just the TV on and a game of yours on the court, and it seemed like the whole world fit in our living room. He used to say that watching you play was like believing that the impossible could happen." She chuckled softly, with a lump in her throat. "And to think that, despite living here in Salt Lake, in the heart of the Jazz, he never stopped being a Bulls fan." Jordan stared at her for long seconds. That gaze carried the same intensity that froze opponents on the court. But now there was something more: respect, recognition. As if at that moment they weren't Waitress and Global Star, but just two people marked by loss, sustaining themselves on memories to continue living. "Are you ready for today's game, Mr. Jordan?" Samantha ventured, her voice soft, almost apologizing for pulling him away from the memory of his parents. "And why did you choose to eat here? There are dozens of better restaurants in the city." Michael looked up, thoughtful. For an instant, he seemed to weigh his words like someone reflecting whether to speak as an idol or as a man. Finally, he replied with a calm firmness, the tone of someone who had faced battles greater than any championship final. "Ready, yes, but it won't be easy. It never is, especially on the opponent's home court. They'll be fired up, the whole crowd against us." He paused briefly, taking a deep breath, as if letting out some of the pressure he carried. "But that's what makes it worthwhile. We'll play everything we know and see what happens." There was a brief silence, heavy with weight. Then Jordan put down his coffee cup, his eyes fixed on hers, and completed with rare honesty. "As for the restaurant, I chose here because sometimes a man needs a normal place, a place where no one expects anything from him, where I can just sit, have coffee, and be an ordinary person for a few minutes." The words hit Samantha hard. She knew that feeling, of being pressured every day to deliver more than she had, of carrying responsibilities greater than she seemed able to bear. She felt understood in a way she hadn't expected. She smiled slightly. "Of course, I understand perfectly." She adjusted her apron, maintaining a respectful tone. "Do you want some time to decide what to eat? I can come back later." Jordan shook his head, a discreet smile breaking his seriousness. No. Actually, it's good to talk to someone. I'll have eggs with bacon, well made, and more coffee. He glanced at the bodyguards. And please, serve my friends whatever they want. You got it, Mr. Jordan, Samantha said naturally, even though inside she could barely believe what was happening. She excused herself with a delicate gesture and walked away, her heart pounding. It wasn't every day that a simple neighborhood waitress served the man who carried the fate of a historic final on his shoulders. Samantha crossed the dining room, still incredulous, trying to appear calm, but her heart was beating so loudly it almost drowned out the clatter of cutlery. She pushed open the kitchen door with her hip and found Paolo frying eggs on the griddle. Paolo, you won't believe who's at table 23. The old Italian didn't even turn around. He was focused on his art. Who? Sam? The Pope? No, Paolo. It's Michael Jordan. Paolo stopped, the metal spatula suspended in the air. Michael Jordan? The basketball player? What's he doing here? I don't know. He ordered eggs with bacon to protect those he loved. Well, mister. Paul, I have to go back before they miss me, Michael said, wiping his face, still trying to understand the inexplicable. Paul smiled serenely. Don't worry, MJ. We are in a timeless space. Here, we can talk for days. And outside, only seconds will have passed. No one can see us, no one can hear us. Michael's eyes widened. Do you mean if someone walks in now, they wouldn't see us? Exactly. Paul's voice sounded deep, almost solemn. This is one of the rare privileges of those who have crossed the threshold of life. Time is no longer a chain that binds us. That's why they say we have time. But God, he has another. And so they remained. Michael, accustomed to being the center of the world, now asked questions like a curious child. What was life like after death? What remained of consciousness? Was there light? Was there pain? Paul answered with simplicity, describing sensations, silences, and the strange form of love that still tied him to his family. In return, the spirit wanted to know everything it could about Jordan, training details, locker room stories, the behind-the-scenes of the great finals, off-court business. It was as if two worlds collided in an impossible conversation, the afterlife and the living legend. Finally, as if an invisible curtain began to close, Paul placed his hand on Jordan's shoulder and said, "Thank you for listening. Now go back. Take care of my daughter, as you would a decisive play." When Michael opened his eyes, he was back in the bathroom. The mirror reflected only his own image. He looked at the clock. Less than 2 minutes had passed. The restaurant was identical, customers in the same positions, as if the world had paused. He sighed deeply. This isn't possible. What madness was this? Back at table 23, ironically, the number that had become his eternal mark, Jordan recomposed himself. A few minutes later, Samantha brought his steaming plate, eggs with bacon and more coffee. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer than before. And then he ventured to ask, "You mentioned your father. What was his name?" Samantha paused for an instant. Paul Fisher. Michael. A shiver ran down his spine. Still, he managed to smile. "You don't need to call me sir. Just Michael is fine." "Okay, Michael." Samantha adjusted her apron, trying to hide the tiredness in her eyes. He looked at her for a moment. "Do you have children?" "A daughter, Lucy, 3 years old." Jordan took a deep breath, remembering his own losses. "Children are life's true miracles." Samantha nodded, with a tired smile, but full of truth. "Truly. She's the reason I get up every day, work 2 jobs, and still find strength. Without her, I would have broken down already." Samantha had barely placed the plate in front of Michael when she felt Dan Hale's shadow fall over the table. The chill that ran down her spine was nothing new. "Samantha, can I speak with you for a second?" His voice was dripping with impatience. She took a deep breath, gave Michael a humorless smile, and stood up. "Excuse me." Dan pulled her arm towards the counter, not caring if they were in plain sight of others. "What do you think you're doing?" he growled, spitting words like venom. "Serving a customer, sir." Her voice was firm but low. "Serving? You were chatting as if you were old friends. This isn't your living room, Fisher. It's a restaurant and you're just a waitress. Understand? Just a waitress." Samantha felt her blood boil, but she knew any response could cost her job. Still, the words escaped. The customer was Michael Jordan. "Did you really want me to treat him as if he were invisible?" Dan narrowed his eyes, letting the mask of false authority slip. "I don't care if it's Michael Jordan, John Stockton, Karl Malone, or the Pope himself. You're not paid to socialize. You're paid to shut up and serve." Out of the corner of her eye, Samantha saw Michael looking in their direction. He no longer pretended not to hear. His jaw was tense. "Mr. Hale, No buts." Dan cut her off, his face red. "Finish serving and then come to the office. I'm tired of you." Samantha returned to the table, her heart pounding. She tried to smile, but the embarrassment was impossible to hide. "I'm sorry about this," she murmured. Michael watched her for a long, intense moment. "Don't apologize. Does that guy always talk to you like that?" She hesitated, biting her lip, but there was something in Jordan's tone that encouraged her. "Only with the black people. With me, with Maria, with the others, never." Jordan leaned back in his chair. His silence was heavy, a prelude to a storm. Then he raised his hand and called Dan with a slow, authoritative gesture. The manager approached, smiling nervously, already wearing the mask of flattery. "Mr. Jordan, what an honor to have you. I hope you're satisfied with our food. If you need anything at all." Jordan interrupted him, his voice low but cutting. "You don't need to be fake with me, Dan. I heard everything. We all heard it." The color drained from the restaurant owner's face. Don't worry," Michael continued, his gaze firm. "I know you're not a basketball fan. That doesn't matter. The problem isn't basketball. It's how you treat your employees, especially the black ones." Dan swallowed hard. "No way, Mr. Jordan, never." "Then explain to me." Jordan's voice grew deeper. "Why are there almost no black employees here?" I can't explain, sir, but I guarantee it's not prejudice." Jordan leaned forward, the intensity in his eyes burning like in the playoff finals. "Then explain to me why you humiliated this young woman here, in front of everyone." Dan stammered. I thought she was bothering you, and you need to rest before the game." Michael gave a dry laugh. "Do you think that if she were bothering me, I wouldn't be able to handle it?" "Of course you would, Mr. Jordan." Jordan then pointed to Samantha. "This young woman is the best waitress who has ever served me. Professional, careful, respectful. You should be proud to have her here instead of treating her like trash." Dan blinked, his mouth opening and closing without a response. "Oh, yes, of course. Samantha is one of our good employees." "Excellent employee," Jordan corrected, his voice firm as steel. "And I hope you recognize that." Dan tried to smile, but he looked like a broken doll. Of course, absolutely." Jordan then stood up, his imposing presence transforming the small Red Canyon diner into an arena. "Do you know why I came here today, Dan? It wasn't by chance. It was for her." Silence fell heavy. Samantha's eyes widened. Her father, Paul Fisher, was a close friend of my father. They served together in the army. I just found out Paul passed away. So when we came to play in Salt Lake, I decided to stop by, meet Samantha, and see if the family needed anything. Dan stammered, not knowing where to look. "And do you know what I found?" Jordan said, pointing to Samantha. "A woman who carries the weight of her family, works 2 jobs, and still maintains her dignity, while you, manager, treat her with contempt." Jordan took out his wallet and placed $200 bills on the table. "This covers the bill. The rest is the tip." He looked at Samantha with silent respect. "Thank you for the conversation. You have no idea how much it meant." Then he looked Dan Hale squarely in the eyes. "Take good care of her. Employees like that are rare. And remember, I play tonight, and the whole world will be watching. The last thing you want is to be remembered as the man who disrespected Michael Jordan's favorite employee." Jordan turned, and the security guards followed him. Dan stood there, white as a sheet, his mouth dry, not knowing what to do. Finally, he just mumbled, "Get back to work." But Samantha didn't hear. She was looking at the bills in her hand, feeling her heart explode in a way that had nothing to do with money. For the first time in years, she felt seen, respected, human, and in that instant, she understood why her father had always spoken of Jordan as more than an athlete. He wasn't just a legend. He was a man capable of changing lives off the court. Night fell over Salt Lake City like a heavy veil. The Delta Center was boiling. 19,000 voices in unison, a sea of purple and white jerseys, jazz flags waving as if the entire city was determined to push its team to Game 7. Outside, police formed cordons to contain the crowd that couldn't get tickets. Inside, every drumbeat, every shout of "Let's go Jazz" shook the concrete. But in the midst of that arena, pulsating like a volcano, There was a man who carried a different silence. Michael Jordan. He didn't smile. He didn't gesticulate. He didn't seem affected by the fury of the crowd. He was serene, almost cold, as if he had brought with him the supernatural calm that had accompanied him in the small restaurant's bathroom that morning. The impossible conversation with Paul Fisher still resonated in his mind, and at that very instant, invisible to everyone, Paul was there, sitting in the last row of the upper deck, not as a body, but as a presence. His firm, proud gaze followed every step of his daughter in Michael's heart. He wasn't there for basketball, but for what it represented. A black man, pressured, watched by the whole world, responding not with hatred or words, but with greatness. The game was brutal. Karl Malone dominated the rebounds, Stockton danced the ball like a master, and Utah's defense was suffocating. But Jordan responded blow for blow. Dunks, fadeaway jumpers, impossible drives. Every time he touched the ball, the arena held its breath. It was like watching a gladiator face not a team, but an entire city. The clock ticked down, and with less than a minute left, the Jazz led 86-85. It was then that Jordan made history. First, he stole the ball from Malone like a predator scenting its prey. Then he dribbled to the paint, stopped dead, and with 5.2 seconds on the clock, rose for what would forever be called the last shot. The ball cut through the air as if time had stopped. Swish. Absolute silence. Jordan didn't celebrate. He didn't beat his chest. He just raised his fist, soberly, aware that he had just etched his name once again into eternity. In the invisible stands, Paul Fisher closed his eyes, smiling. It was as if he could see at the same time the sparkle in his daughter Samantha's eyes, holding those $200 bills at the Red Canyon Diner, and the sparkle in the arena that now witnessed the coronation of a king. When the clock hit 0 and the Bulls lifted the trophy, Jordan didn't look to the sky, but Paul swore he had felt it. It was the victory of a team, but it was also the victory of dignity, respect, and the courage to rise against injustice. Paul slowly disappeared into the darkness of the Delta Center, certain that his daughter, his granddaughter Lucy, and even his widow would find a better future, because that day, Michael Jordan had not only defeated the Utah Jazz, he had defeated the world. Samantha watched Game 6 on the old television in her small apartment in Glendale, Salt Lake City. Lucy, asleep on her lap, breathed deeply, her small chest rising and falling slowly, as if unaware of the whirlwind the world was in. When Jordan made the last shot, Samantha stood up without realizing it, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't just basketball. It wasn't just victory. It was as if she was watching, live, proof that the impossible can be conquered. Paul Fisher's ghost was right. Greatness came not only from points, but from the heart. Days later, unexpected news spread through the neighborhood. Michael Jordan had bought the Red Canyon Diner building. At first, no one understood. A few days later, Dan Hale, in a fit of rage, announced that the rent had tripled and the restaurant would be closed immediately. He fired all employees without warning, spreading panic and despair. Samantha returned home devastated, not knowing how she would support Lucy. But a month later, everything changed. The building was fenced off, the windows replaced, and a gigantic renovation took over. When the dust settled, a new restaurant emerged. The name remained Red Canyon Diner, but now it shone in golden letters with new tables, a state-of-the-art kitchen, and an atmosphere that blended modernity and tradition. A phone call changed Samantha's destiny. Michael Jordan's advisors invited her to a meeting. At the meeting, they handed her signed documents. The restaurant was hers. Jordan had bought the building to take it out of Dan Hale's hands, and discreetly had made Samantha the sole owner. Stunned, she could barely speak. The Red Canyon Diner, where she had been humiliated so many times, was now her kingdom. She hired new employees, brought Paolo back to the kitchen, gave work to her mother and siblings. Lucy was enrolled in a private school, surrounded by the care she always deserved. For the first time in a long time, Samantha breathed not only relief but hope. At the official inauguration, the tables were full, the smell of fresh dishes filled the air, and in the reserved corner at table 23, Michael Jordan had lunch in silence, with the same strong coffee and eggs with bacon. As he left, he greeted Samantha with a discreet hug and a knowing smile, as if saying without words, "Now it's your turn." That same night, As Michael reviewed the papers that would seal his definitive retirement, Paul Fisher appeared once more. His gaze was different, lighter. "Thank you, MJ. You changed the lives of my daughter, my wife, my children, my granddaughter, but I didn't just come to thank you. I came to bring you a message from your father." Michael swallowed hard. Paul continued. "He said he's proud. Proud not only of the champion, but of the man you became. He said you don't just play with your hands, but with your heart, and that no one can ever erase that." Tears quietly streamed down Michael's face. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. Months later, Jordan announced his retirement. He officially became the highest-paid athlete on the planet, but more than that, he transformed into an eternal symbol. For Samantha and her family, the Red Canyon Diner prospered like never before, a beacon of dignity in Salt Lake City. And on that corner, everyone knew it wasn't just a restaurant. It was living proof that destiny, pain, and courage can intertwine and change everything. It was the end of an era in basketball, but the beginning of many other stories of dignity, hope, and redemption. Jordan, now retired and the highest-paid athlete on the planet, carried with him something no money could buy: eternal respect. And you? Have you ever experienced a moment when life took a complete turn, but in the end brought a blessing in disguise? Have you ever found someone who believed in you when everyone else doubted? And more. If you had the opportunity to thank a person who has passed away, what would you say? If this story touched your heart, leave your comment and share your own experiences of hope and overcoming. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and help spread messages that remind us that good always finds a way. Like and share this video so more people can receive this inspiration. Friends, this story is a work of fiction, inspired by the power of human kindness and the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect, regardless of their social or economic position. Although the characters are fictional, the lessons about compassion, perseverance, and the importance of passing on blessings are very real.